And that bundle is a theoretically portable idea. You could pick it up and move it somewhere else in the site. You could actually take it once you have that Q&A pair. You could print it and hand it out because it sort of stands alone, right? And even in, we've seen these in a lot of different examples. Sorry, this is a little blurry, but in the Apple support community that I was running up until recently, we tried to do a really good job of highlighting that Q and highlighting that A and making it very clear when you hit the site, no matter what channel you were coming from. If you were coming from Google, if you were coming from a browsing experience on the site, you were coming from a direct link, that when you landed, you could get that sense of where I'm at, and I understand the question, I understand the answer, and that bundle existed. If you go to Quora, you see these all the time where somebody asks a very specific question and you get a whole series of answers, but the way that they've designed the site, it really bundles up pretty effectively. And in a lot of our support communities lately, we're starting to see this solved activity, right, where if somebody marks as solved, that answer comes from wherever else it might be in the thread, even if it's 10 pages deep, and gets bumped up and attached to that original original question. And we talk a lot about Q&A pairs as part of support communities because obviously it's sort of straightforward, right? In a support community, I've got a problem, I have an issue, I'm coming in to directly ask a question, somebody's coming in to answer that question. And we don't see, like we do in a lot of other discussions, sort of a branching activity, right, where somebody comes in and says, what's the best way to airbrush the color red on a white T-shirt? And there's legitimately 100 different ways you could do that, and all of those are good answers, versus a support discussion that tends to be much more focused on a single question, single answer sort of combo in theory, although there's always multiple ways to do just about any solution. But really, this does apply, right? This idea of Q&A pairs applies, and so we're talking about support, and I'm going to dig in on that one a little bit more today. But the idea of the Q&A pair can and should extend to any type of community, really, because again, we're talking about an ability or a reason somebody's asking a question. I need help in some form, even if that's give me your feedback on solar panels and the larger global energy policy, right? You're still asking a question. You really still want an answer of some sort. Answer may get a little bit more vague. But as we talk about the support community environment, I think there's really three big pieces that I talk a lot about, and I've been talking more and more about this year after year, that so much of support community starts with, are we creating really great Q&A pairs? Because if you don't have answers that go with questions, if those aren't matched up and portable, you don't really have a support community, right? You have a community that's asking a lot of questions. They may be getting a lot of answers, but if you're not finding a way to bundle those answers with the questions, there's not as much value to the user, especially if you find yourself in an environment like I was at Apple, where a huge percentage of our traffic, like most support communities, was coming straight from Google. So when somebody would land on the site, an awesome Q&A pair was crucial to making sure that they didn't just bounce out and go to the next link that was next in Google. So let's talk about the three. The first one is a very clear Q along with a very clear A. The second one is that it's credible, that pair is credible, the question makes sense, and the answer is trustworthy. And fast, that at the end of the day, if we're creating support forum Q&A pairs, and it's taking us 3 or 4 or 5 weeks or maybe longer to actually get those, that person's moved on, right? They're coming in to get a quick answer, and that speed is crucial. So let's dive in a little bit. This image on the left, it doesn't really matter that it's blurry because I have no idea, even if it was clear, where have I landed, right? So I've done a Google search, I've landed on the site, and what am I here for, right? There's no clear question that I'm seeing. So if this is a 10-page deep response in a long thread, where am I? What's going on? It's surprising how fast users will bump out of a click-through when they on a support forum when they don't figure out where they're actually at, where they have no idea where they've landed. In the example that we've been building at Apple, we really tried to go out of our way to very distinctly create, through design and through layout, that clear Q and that clear A, right? So that when somebody lands on the site, it's very clear what the question is. It's marked with a big fat Q, for crying out loud. and that the A slot is filled with however we're doing answers, right? So an answer can be marked as solved. It can be, which usually is from an original poster. It can be a helpful, right? That somebody who's experienced this content and says, yeah, I didn't ask the question, but that's a good answer. Or it can even be what we were doing at Apple, where we were empowering some of our support staff to actually go in and mark things as Apple recommended, right? Because the better we can propagate that answer slot, so to speak, the more value the user gets when they land, and there's that bundled pair. We have often this problem where it's that marked as solved thing that we just we find ourselves really struggling to get users to mark as solved, because that's not something that especially people who bounce into a support forum and bounce out, even if they do get an answer, that they tend to stick around long enough to click a button that says, yes, this helped, much less if they ask a question and it takes 2 or 3 or 4 days to get an answer, are they going to come back and mark it? So what are the other things that we can do to really make this bundle clear, right, that this is what's actually happening? It's a clear Q&A. The second one is credible. So we talk a lot about credibility and trustworthiness of answers, but a lot of this credibility comes from the content itself, but it comes from the user. So like I said earlier, if I say, how do I turn off notifications on iOS? Well, that can be the question, but there's 15 different answers. Some of them may be more or less credible relative to my issue at hand. And if you look at these 3 examples I've pulled, with what we were doing at Apple with Apple Recommends, that was allowing the company to actually go in and say, officially, this is something that is a good answer, populates that A slot. But with AT&T, they've not only created, like so many support forums do, a leveling system, right? They had their experts and their ACE members who had participated enough over time and got enough positive content over time to grow to that level. They were very clearly putting what ACE meant in those answers where they were replying, so people could very quickly connect with them. My guess is that they had a similar dynamic where a lot of their traffic was coming in from Google, and they had a matter of seconds before somebody was saying, I'm not connected with this content, I'm bouncing out. So they were pulling that credibility right up front. And then, Autodesk has, it's hard to see in this picture, but in this upper left-hand corner, there's an 11, you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and on, as people gain expertise throughout the system. And so as you look down a list of answers, especially if nobody's marked something as answered or as solved, you'll see the numbers, so if you're seeing 1, 2, 3, 10, 9, you know who to pay attention to, and you know who's got that credibility. And then fast, the last one as I run out of time here, the fast piece is something that as we build these Q&A pairs and we really think about how do we create credibility, how do we make them clear, we also have to figure out how are we making those answers happen fast. And this is sort of the holy grail of how do we get people engaged in a support forum. But speed is something we often forget about, or we think about it slightly differently. But the worst part that we can have happen in the environment with a Q&A pair is to see the content linger for a while, right? So not only is that bad for the community experience, it's bad for the business experience, because obviously if somebody's coming in and they're asking a question 2 or 3 minutes later, or 2 or 3 hours later, they're not getting an answer. 4 or 5 hours later, they're not getting an answer. A couple of days later, they still don't have an answer. They've long gone on to another support channel. They've picked up the phone, they've dropped an email, and now you're double tapped, and you have to pay attention to not only the community itself, but also the phone when they called in, or the email when they emailed in. So really thinking about how do we design an experience that allows those fast answers? How do we get more of the power users involved? Because the creation is not just about the answer, it can often be the speed of answer. How much do we participate, right? We talk a lot about how fast do we respond in order to let community vibe build. But in a support community, often it's more important to see our answers close out faster. So we have to really think about all 3 of these together. So yeah. That's my time, and those are the 3 things that if you walk away thinking about support communities, how do you build great Q&A pairs? Q&A pairs are at the heart, you build them with a clear Q&A, you build them with credibility, and you build them so that they can get answered and be displayed fast. So with that, that's my time. Thank you very much.